Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our event today. This is the Ortecha Data Leadership Series final event of 2023. It's the 12th of December. And yes, this is a festive data fireside splat. And yes, we do mean fireside splat. We decided that fireside chats do need to be more fun. And obviously there's no better time to do this than this time of year. So we should be having some fun today. I would suggest if you've got your Santa hat or your Christmas jumper, put it on now. I have got mine on, just to be clear. Yes, it does say Christmas jumper. I think Kyle gets the award for the best outfit from what I can see. So well done, Kyle. Very impressed.
Go.
And obviously, great to have such esteemed speakers with me today. So we'll do some intros. I'll just kick things off first. So Pete Youngs, I'll be your host today. I'm the managing partner at Ortecha. So we've been running this leadership series through the second half of this year. We're a data and analytics consulting firm focused on helping companies improve their data capabilities to move to a place where they can trust their data better. Kyle, over to you to introduce yourself, please.
Cheers, Pete. So my name's Kyle Winterbottom. I'm the founder and CEO of Orbition. We are a talent solutions business that operates exclusively within the data and analytics world. So that consists of, I guess, a search and recruitment business, an advisory practice, and I guess an employer branding practice specifically to help organizations to attract and build and scale their data analytics teams. And also I host the Driven by Data community, which consists of our podcast, our events, our mentorship program, and I guess more recently our magazine launch.
Yeah, love the magazine. Read that cover to cover. Susan, over to you, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Susan Walsh. I'm the classification guru, fixer of dirty data. My team and I spend our lives cleaning that horrible data that nobody else wants to touch. I'm also author of Between the Spreadsheets and the Fixing Dirty Data course. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to today.
Thank you. And Stan?
Hey, everyone. Hi, Pete. Thanks all for dressing up. I dressed up a little bit as well, but not as good as Kyle and Susan and Pete, clearly. So Stan, one of the co-founders of Colibra, that's now 15 years ago. And currently responsible for running our own data office, which is where we at Colibra drink our own champagne or eat our own dog food, depends on the perspective, or sometimes on the day. And happy to be here.
Great. Thanks very much indeed. I think we should pause for a moment and just say what we want for Christmas before we continue. So I'm going to set the bar very high because at the top of my Christmas list is a McLaren Artura supercar.
Nice.
In Cirrus Grey. I'm not sure I'm going to get it, but it's going to stay at top of my list for a while. What about you, Susan?
Well, I mean, first choice would obviously be a date with Robbie Williams, but apart from that, just a holiday and a break would be really nice.
Well, maybe that's coming up.
Yeah, it's a bit more realistic.
Stan, what about you? What's top of that list?
Christmas wishes. I wish COVID to be gone forever.
Oh.
Yeah. I should say, actually, both Stan and Susan are not very well. So thank you for joining us and powering through. We really do appreciate that.
This is a distraction tactic.
Yeah, we'll distract you for an hour. Yeah. And Kyle, what's top of your wish list?
Probably just more whiskey, Pete, to be honest with you. The only thing that gets me through life. So yeah,
Right. And especially through winter.
The more of that, the better. Yeah.
Right. A bit easier to come by than the McLaren, I think. So yeah, I hope you get that. Okay, so as I've mentioned, this is the last in our data leadership series of this year, the festive data fireside splat. So I think just a quick recap of what we've covered this year. We've had a number of events as we've gone through. So what we've touched on initially was designing a data strategy. We then moved into choosing a data operating model. So really those foundational aspects of strategy and then how you set the team up so you can continue and you can operate well on data management analytics. We then moved into building an effective data culture, to touching on how your data culture is an extension of your organizational culture. So that was a really interesting one. We then went into demystifying data products, and I think we might touch on that again today briefly. And last month was making sense of AI. I suspect we're going to say AI a few times today as we recap on the year. So really that's what today is about. We're going to take a look at 2023. We're going to call out some of our key observations from the year, some of those trends. And then we're going to take a look at 2024, the year that will be, think about some predictions for next year. I'm sure AI is going to be in the mix there as well. We have got the chat box here in Zoom, and we have got the Q&A box. So please do use the chat box. We like to keep these interactive. So if you've got questions, please do call them out in the chat box, and we'll cover those at the end. Actually, if you've got questions, do put them in the Q&A box. Otherwise, I may miss them. So questions in the Q&A box and comments as we go through in the chat box. That would be wonderful. We have got some of the Ortecha and Challenge Marketing team on hand to help us today. So from Ortecha, we've got Tanya, Araminta and Sean in the chat box. So if you'd like to use text to introduce yourself, that would be wonderful. And obviously you mentioned that chat box. Why don't we make it interactive now? So if you type in the chat box, your name and where you are in the world, what city you're in, it'd be amazing to see where some of you are today. Personally, I'm in Hertfordshire near St Albans, just outside London. Where are you, Susan?
I'm kind of the flip side of you. I'm in Guildford in Surrey, so just round the other side of the M25.
Okay, and Kyle?
The best city in England, which obviously, as we know, everyone knows, is Manchester.
I thought you might say that. And Stan?
Brussels, Belgium.
Woo!
Brilliant.
Exotic.
Okay, so I can see Henley. Oh, Frank's in Lisbon. Cindy is in Georgia in the US. Cool. So central London. Oh, another St Albans. Okay, Julian, we should indeed meet up.
Oh, wow. Israel.
Great. Tel Aviv. Another Manchester. Chiswick. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Right, I think the most important part of today, obviously not covering our data observations and predictions for next year, but of course it is data buzzword bingo. So we said we wanted to have a bit of fun today. So buzzword bingo is going to be played throughout this, not by the speakers, but by you people listening. So there's 5 terms or words you're listening out for. Obviously AI is one of them. We've got data product, we've got data fluency, data wrangling and value in the context of data value. So as you hear, I'm setting this up now. As you hear these words, please type them into the comment box to show that you've heard them. When you've heard all 5, please type into the comment word box buzzword bingo in capitals, so it's really clear and easy to see. And you will get a prize. So you're actually going to win a copy of Susan's book, Between the Spreadsheets. And we will work out how we get that to you. We'll recap on that at the end. So there it is. There's the actual copy. Is this going to be signed, Susan?
It will be signed. We can personalize that too. It will be posted by me. So yeah, I'm actually flying out to the US a week today, so I'll make sure it's posted by the weekend.
Cool. And what's the book about? I can imagine, but give us a quick summary.
It's a mixture of practical how to actually clean, classify, normalize data in Excel and build spend taxonomies, but also there's the business perspective too, why you should do it, what are the consequences when you don't. There's an amazing data horror stories chapter, which seems to be everyone's favorites. Cool. A few people from LinkedIn anonymously donated some data horror stories. So yeah, right. Makes everyone feel kind of, I guess, relieved that they're not the only ones.
I can imagine you can read it and feel a bit better when you're perhaps struggling with some of those difficult things. Okay, good. Well, thank you for that, Susan. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay, so we'll get into our review of 2023. So basically, we had a discussion beforehand, and we've got down some ideas that we just wanted to recap on. Obviously, AI, generative AI, with the launch of ChatGPT, particularly in the start of this year, and LLMs or large language models. I think that's the key theme that's come through. Everyone has mentioned this. I think every webinar, every speaker session you go to, this gets mentioned. If you went to Big Data London, I think it was in every single session apart from 2 or something. But yeah, what do we think about this? Is it hype? Stan, what's your view on this? And what about Calibra, and where do you think this is going? What was this year really done? for us in terms of Calibra and your view on, obviously you've got a huge view of data cataloging in so many organizations.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I was laughing because on the chat box, all the AI, it
Yeah.
reminded me of, somebody made a clip out of Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google's. They did a session and they reduced it to 15 seconds, and it was just him saying AI, 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 AI.
Right.
And to be honest, that's sort of how this year felt, because in November of last year, you could actually call it like a BC moment and an AC moment, right? Before November, AI used to be the data scientists' purview. They used to control how models were built. But maybe there's only 10 million data scientists in the world. And after November of last year, every 12-year-old kid who could speak English could do AI. So it's never been this mainstream this fast. And obviously that also came into our space, into our market. So people started to do things like, oh, why should I learn Python? I can just ask GPT to do the data analysis for me. So you started seeing all sorts of interesting stuff that is still continuing. I would say 2023 is the year of creative destruction with AI. Every week something new comes out. So you have to experiment with it. You have to play with it. You have to look at what the big vendors are doing, the open source as well. And it's also the reason, Pete, why I'm wearing this hat. I mean, apart from my receding hairline. But essentially, at Colibra, they asked, hey, Stan, can you look at this AI thing and figure out how we should play this? And when I dug into it really deep earlier in the year, I started to notice, okay, we can actually now automate things that were not automatable before.
Yeah.
A lot of people, when it comes to data governance and metadata, they're like, oh, I have to, why do I have to write these descriptions, et cetera, et cetera. People don't have problems writing long emails, but they do have problems writing descriptions for metadata. But essentially,
Yeah, that's so
you can
true.
now have that generated by these LLMs, right? And it comes up with a relatively good thing that you can then edit. But also from Colibra's standpoint, it's also an exciting time because it brings out increasingly fast the need for AI governance, because it's never the robot who is to blame, right? It's the operator of the machine or the manufacturer of the machine that is to blame. So in that sense, it's going to be an interesting time for all of us data people around the world. And back to the hat, this is to remind myself and all the people in our company, about 1,000 colleagues, but also in the world, chill out. AI is today nothing but ask an intern, right? If you ask the GPT something and it gives you an answer, if you take that answer to your boss or your customer, it's not the intern's fault. You're the fool, right? So with the AI, ask an intern, you also have to, go into dialogue with it. If you get an answer, you have to challenge it back and interact a little bit before you get to a good outcome. That's the stage we're at, which is pretty impressive. But also, it's not here to replace us just yet.
Yeah, Carl, I think it was on your podcast with Lindsay Weir where you were talking about adoption of AI, and there's people that are going to blaze a trail, and there's some people that are going to bide their time, and sometimes the ones that bide their time do actually overtake, and they miss some of the pitfalls they learn from other people. So I thought that was really interesting in your discussion with Lindsay. So what's your view on AI this year?
Yeah, so I think what she said was you don't have to be first, you just have to be best, right?
Yeah, that was it, wasn't it? Yeah.
I think there's been many examples like that throughout time and business, right? If you think about, like, I don't know, Nokia and BlackBerry of the phone world, right? They were even they probably weren't first, but yeah. So I mean, I found it fascinating. This feels bigger than anything that's ever come before it, right? If you think about hype cycles of the past, like big data or data science or data mesh or whatever other buzzword that we can think of, this just feels like there's more to it. There's more potential. There's more interest. There's more interest from your average Joe who don't even work in the industry. full stop. So I think, I don't think it's hype. I think it's definitely knocked off some things that were probably more prevalent at the start of the year. So, data mesh was still having its day on LinkedIn practically every day at the
Yeah.
start of the year. Same with ESG. Actually, we've not heard much about either of those two towards the back end of this year. So yeah, I think it's definitely, it's definitely dominated the headlines, and I think there will, like anything, there'll be some winners and some losers of this. I find it fascinating actually that still, it's like any hype cycle, but businesses are just willing to jump in and invest. And I'm sure what Susan's going to touch upon at some point, but we've been in this situation time and time and time again, and yet still most businesses don't have the foundational elements of getting their data in order, so to speak, to get the most out of it. And we still seem to be kind of gearing towards businesses just, well, we want to do Gen AI, but they don't know where the data is, the accessibility of it, how good it is, so on and so forth. So I still worry that we're getting, still caught up in that. But I've had some great conversations on our podcast. There's something coming out early next year, actually, so I don't want to give too much away. But one of the major UK financial services organizations that's got a few Gen AI models in production that's really helping them to drive value, and they reckon they're going to have another 10 to 15 use cases ready to go by the end of Q1 next year. So
right.
There's evidently some ahead of the curve, which is always fascinating to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you touch on the accessibility. So just the fact that we can log into a browser, we can get to it, and we can play with it. Stan, you mentioned it as well. Just the fact that anyone can just have a go. But I think you've mentioned there, Carl, you need the right data underneath. So Susan, I think that's something that resonates with you, isn't it? You can use Gen AI, but if you're pointing at your corporate data store with your firewall closing it down, you need some quality data in there, surely, for it to be really capable.
Yeah, more importantly than that, though, is the kind of literacy part. So if you don't know your data and you put it into some kind of Gen AI tool, how are you going to know if the results are right or wrong? So I think at the moment there's maybe a lot of blind trust going on. And I think, we're talking about this as a blanket application to everything. There are areas, like Kyle was saying, where, it's really going to help make things more efficient, but there's certainly areas where I work where it's just not there yet at all. And I've definitely been sitting kind of back watching everything unfold. We tested it a little bit, maybe about May time, and we're quicker manually cleaning it ourselves for what we were doing. But interestingly, I was on a panel last week, and I can't remember his name, but he works for a company that uses have been testing Gen AI out a lot, and they're actually coming to the conclusion that it's not that good. So I think there are areas where it's going to be phenomenal and it's going to make accuracy and time saving amazing, and then there are other parts where it's going to make people's lives more difficult. But yeah, behind all of that is clean data, because if it's pooling from dirty data, you're going to get dirty answers.
Yeah, and some people aren't even going to check those answers.
They're going to assume they're right.
The result. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you go to your senior management, whether that's with a dashboard or a report or some information. If you don't know where that information's come from and if it's right, then that's going to, credibility is going to go through the floor.
Yeah. Stan, were you going to chime in then?
Yeah, I was actually going to say that with this new AI paradigm that has gone mainstream very quickly, as we were discussing, I mean, does it really need clean data is something that I'm asking myself these days, because, it's trained on the internet, which, as we know, isn't really representative of clean data. I'm sure they have like the Reddit forums in there as well and other stuff. So,
misinformation.
I mean, I know it needs clean data. Data is a good diet for AI. That's very clear. But at the same time, it was trained on the internet, so it doesn't seem very clean to me.
Yeah, Sean, I know is in the chat box. We're doing a bit of a pilot within Ortecha with Microsoft Copilot, and I know that's being launched. And you can ring fence your data. I think it can be fed from the internet, but then it can look at your corporate data store and not spill it out into the internet and the World Wide Web. So then, like if we were writing a proposal or we're working on a deliverable for a client, that could help us to accelerate the delivery of those documents by looking at what we've done before. Yeah. So that's quite a powerful proposition for me in a consulting firm and can really help our clients. Yeah. But I guess what's it going to look at? You all know in Teams, we've got so many drafts of documents that actually we probably don't want it to look at. And we do want it to look at final documents and so on. So be interesting to see what it does when we get it working.
I think it's going to have a better success rate if it's within an organization than if it's trying to do everything.
Yeah, with some particular context that you can point it to and you can get value from.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's probably
so. From our viewpoint, it's trained on the internet, so dirty data very much, but they spend a lot of time cleaning and curating it, right? They outsource that a lot. But ultimately, we're now all on the same page again, right? We all have that pre-trained model, whether it's
indeed
some weird cat name or some other name that they have for all this model, but we're all equal again. So the only thing that differentiates us is our own data that we add to it to get more relevant answers, obviously.
Yeah. Let the competition begin. Yeah.
And
we
that's
mentioned
where the competitive advantage. I was going to say that's where the competitive advantage is of using it, right? If you think about this in its most basic form, if everyone's got access to the same tool, then there is no competitive advantage. But as soon as you get into the realms of a business that is better at using data anyway, that should expedite that journey. And you thought the gap gets wider. The more successful and quicker the more successful an organization is by using data currently and how much time they spend cleaning it and using it and et cetera, et cetera. So
actually, but there's more than that actually. Kyle, you might be interested in this. Nicola Askham and I actually ran a data governance workshop at Calibra's offices a couple of weeks ago. And somebody in the room said that they were doing an interview and they could tell that the person they were asking questions to was literally finding the answers in ChatGPT as they were being asked the question. And they could tell from the responses that they actually were just blagging it and they didn't really know what they were doing. But there's, that could either work for you or against you.
Yeah. It sounds like they're going to trip themselves up if they get the job, doesn't it? But
yeah,
I'd love to see how that plays out. Yeah,
I bet that happens all the time though. With old-fashioned CVs, if they don't.
True. Yeah. So I know the people are catching some of the buzzword bingo terms. So value. I wanted to come on to that. We've touched on that within there, and I know Kyle, you've mentioned this frequently through the year. And a couple of aspects to this. I think it's been a challenging 2023 economically and financially for many people, organizations and individuals. We're seeing some job cuts. We're seeing data analytics teams being cut. I'm sure part of that is this year economically, but there also seems to be a tipping point from this year of we need to see the value from these now well-embedded data analytics teams. And some organizations are doing really well at this. Some are not quite realizing the value or being able to demonstrate the value coming out of a data office or a data analytics team. I think you're seeing this often, Kyle. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating conversation, isn't it? I think, the short, blunt answer here, Pete, is that in any economic, uncertain times, anything that is deemed to be a cost center that cannot articulate the value that it's adding is going to be at risk of being cut. That's just the unfortunate reality of the situation. But what I find the most fascinating aspect of this is that you have some organizations who I'll interview on the podcast or I speak to in our day job, so to speak, who have mechanisms in place where they can say, yes, this project delivered X in terms of pounds and pence or euros or whatever the currency. But then equally, you've got people in the same industry that will turn around and argue with you until they're blue in the face that this isn't possible. So there's just this really weird paradigm going on. I think this comes down to many organizations at the outset get the hiring wrong. I personally think that's where we're in this vicious cycle of what businesses want or what business leaders want from their data analytics investments is value, however they measure that, whatever those metrics are, that's what they want. However, they don't know how to articulate that into a person or a set of skills, and therefore they get sucked into, you know, you hear me bang on about how poor job descriptions are all the time, but just a shopping list of requirements, you know, Python, SQL, AWS, whatever. And the people that they hire are the people that they think they need, but not in relation to getting value out of data and analytics. So they're almost like it's a different skill set, and it's a cycle that we're in that we are struggling to break. But fundamentally, I think it just comes down to most data analytics organizations are unable, for whatever reason, to either A, quantify, or B, articulate their piece of the pie, so to speak. So, and then as soon as you're in that realm, when things aren't going well, and and look, organizations are, they set themselves up to fail 9 times out of 10, right, through the hiring and through the overinvestment in hype and not having the right foundations in place and yada yada yada. But ultimately, I think that's become the job of the CDO or the most senior data person in the organization. It's the translation to this is what we're doing, this is how it aids the business goals or objectives or strategy, and B, this is how we're going to measure how valuable it is. And I think that's the job. But as I said, organizations don't hire for that job, they hire for a different job and then complain when they get a different result.
Well, maybe this is the year where there is indeed a steep learning curve and there is some turmoil and churning, and not just CDOs, but maybe the C-suite is actually going to learn from this and say, well, actually we didn't get this right. We need to adapt, and we need a different type of CDO in 2024.
I think also it's managing expectations. So I think at the very top, they don't really understand how things work. And there's the whole view, oh, you just need to press the button and that happens. Whereas actually there's weeks of work behind it. And it might be that in the past we wanted to pretend like it was easy and we did it in 5 minutes, but actually we need to be more realistic and honest about how long these things take. And that's where a lot of the hidden value is. It's in time, it's in time saved or errors prevented and those kinds of things that you can't always measure very well.
Not just pounds and pence or dollars or whatever. It's not always financial. It can be productivity gains. It can be risk mitigation as well, can't it? So there's different definitions of value. Stan, what's your view on this? Obviously, Collibra is a tool. People are investing in it. It's been a challenging year. What have you been changing the way you articulate the value of Collibra, or is it the same story? What's your view on that?
Oh, definitely. So, and I've been shouting from the rooftops that we need to get better as data people to speak the language of the business. My first remark has always been, we're trying to bring the business to us, right? So doing things like, hey, data modeling for the business. It's not the business's job to do data modeling, right? It's your job to do it for them. But this has gotten worse now because we have to go beyond just speaking their language and helping them do the work. We have to go to actually making clear to them how every data product, just because it exists, doesn't necessarily generate value. But what it does do is generate cost and risk, right? Because that's a simple data product. Buzzword bingo. Let's take a simple.
It's one of the terms.
Like a dashboard, Looker, Power BI, Tableau, that sort of thing. Everybody can cook these things these days, right? But there's a warehouse behind it. There's compute right there. There's storage. There's data being moved from source to target, transformed, more CPU cost, and then the data is also sitting there accumulating. And every one of those points is a point where it can get stolen and breached and hacked. So just like when a tree falls in the woods, does it make a noise? When a dashboard is sitting there, does it generate value? Question mark. But it definitely has cost and risk associated with it. So I think as data professionals, it's our job now really to make the translation to the business from data into the actual dollar. Now, despite me saying that for a good 2 to 3 years and finding a lot of audience for it, I'm still seeing only a very small percentage of organizations actually doing it that way, right? They like to skip that step for all sorts of reasons, but it's, you know, when times are getting tighter and budgets are more constrained and more controlled, getting that skill and having that skill and exercising it is going to become increasingly mandatory. The good thing is, Pete, that we don't have to figure out how to do it. Because there's this great MIT data monetization book that we'll highlight later, right? But essentially, how to do it is already known. It's been studied. So there are frameworks and ways. You just have to do it. And yes, it might be a little bit difficult to translate, you know, is this data worth $1 or $10? You know, that exercise is not always clear cut, but doing the exercise is the point.
Yeah, I know Doug Laney has been talking about this for many years, hasn't he? Trying to drive the sort of economics of data. I think the EDM Council are running their ROI work group that may have concluded now. There's some good stuff that's come out of that. So there's some really good knowledge behind this now. I think the time is up to be not doing this. So let's say in 2024, we want to see more of this. Maybe we'll do a recap at the end of next year and see if our dreams have come true. Data product.
Oh,
yeah, sorry, go Susan.
I was just going to say, there's almost a language barrier. I came from a non-data background. I came from more of a business background and then started working with data people. And, you know, I would almost have arguments because they would be adamant that the code was right, but the output that I was seeing was not right. The actual data was wrong. And so I think there's still a bit of work to do with actually like the data side meeting the business side halfway and being able to understand each other. Very true. Kyle?
I was just going to say, so on the podcast episode that I mentioned earlier about the Gen AI productionized modeling thing, part of that conversation also was very intriguing because I was basically asking the guest, does it, I guess the measuring the value of it, is that any different with Gen AI projects than it is traditional data analytics projects? And I guess the short answer on that was no. But what the guest said was that he treats his data analytics organization like a PE firm. So the benefits case has to be completed before a single bit of work gets done. And if it's not going to deliver a return, it doesn't get done. And if they start a project and the stakeholder loses interest or they start messing about or whatever the case may be, it gets pulled immediately. Because he was basically saying, you know, I'm not going to put my name to anything that isn't going to get delivered and get actioned and therefore won't be, you know, valuable in quotation marks. So, yeah,
interesting. There's two other things that I think we should touch on. I know we're sort of timing out on this section, but I think we should keep going. So data products we've mentioned, and then we should talk about data monetization. I know we've touched on it in there, but data product, data as a product, data as a service. My view on this is that this year has been the where data products have really come to the fore. I know people still would disagree on the definition, and I'm sure we'll coalesce on this one day. But actually moving towards data as a product and actually data as a service, whereby we can provision data to consumers, and it is indeed valuable. So there was a business case for that data, and it is used on your Radio Point stand. It's not just sitting there in a dashboard and no one's looking at it. And actually, over time, it's just adding risk. So, anyone want to? What's your view on data products? Do you think that's been a key theme of this year? Are we heading in the right direction? Kyle, maybe.
I mean, it's definitely been a theme of this year. I think it probably started at the back end of last year, right? In terms of the terminology, I know that we ran a few events where that was the topic of discussion. It's definitely been a theme. I think, you know, we're still getting a lot of debate in the industry around the differences between data products and data as a product, and I guess almost the robustness, if you will, of how that data product is managed like a traditional product versus whether it's just, you know, built with product management thinking around it. So there's a lot of debate, but I think broadly speaking, I mean, where I see this tending to be more useful than anything else, we're starting to get obviously the data product owner or the data product manager as a role. I'm not too sure how much product it is, more so it's almost become, in many organizations, rightly or wrongly, the almost like a rebadged version of the translator role. You know, it's almost like a BA that comes from maybe a data technical background, but it can go into the business and gather the requirements and then go back and translate. Right,
still
this is
that
what we need
bridge.
to do. Yeah, so
Yeah.
still very much the bridge. To be honest, Pete, I sometimes wonder whether in this industry I mean, language is very important, right? But in the right context, I think sometimes we get really ate up on the semantics, you know, like I hear all the time people, you know, literally fighting over data driven versus data informed versus data led. I think there's some things that we should debate and there's some things
evidence-based.
that we're not. But broadly speaking, it's definitely been a theme. And I think it's probably started to do good actually, more so than it's done bad. So
good. Susan, Stan, any data product observations?
I have many, but Susan, you want to go first?
I mean, I hear it and I've heard it a lot this year, but it just feels like the new sexy term for the year for something that we've been doing for decades already, just
repackaged. Used to call it a data set.
Format. Yeah. We're still here manually cleaning things and in business. So, you know, there's still a need for that. So we need it. We need everything.
Absolutely, the work isn't going away. So I'll try to be short, Pete, but just a few points on the data products trend. First of all, we're big fans of it, and it's a trend that we see coming back in 3 areas. So it's present in the data mesh wave that you see. It's present in MIT's data monetization work that we touched on earlier.
Okay.
But it's also present in Gartner's framework for the CDO, where they talk about, you know, CDO version 1 being defensive. Those were the ones in the banks in the early days, right? Then offensive, then digital, and CDO version 4, according to Gartner, is all about data products. So it's definitely present in the market. Second, what is it? For me, it's quite broad, right? It could be a data set itself. It could be a dashboard, an AI model, what have you. There's like different ways to look at what a data product is. But I think the most important thing it does for organizations is build that bridge to the business. Because when you ask the business person, hey, we need to make money from data, they think about selling data, right? But what they do know very well as a business person is that they offer value to their customers and stakeholders by offering them products and services, right? So a data product now becomes conceptually for them the shortest distance between data, the conceptual distance between data and the dollar or the euro or the pound or what have you. And I think what that means is that it doesn't force some process thinking on the organization, right? Because any other product or service, an organization just doesn't create, right? Like your iPhone just doesn't come out of thin air just because Steve Jobs had an idea, right?
Takes
effort.
effort.
What happens is organizations have these processes for their products and services. And let's take 2 as an example and apply those to data products. So they have ideation processes. How do you come up with a new product or service? What are the steps for that? And one of the steps includes identifying a business need and who's going to be the owner of validating that that product actually matches that need, right? So that's an ideation process, coming up with new products and services. And then the other end of the spectrum, and there's a lot in between, is a sunsetting process. If you have a product or service which is no longer necessary, or maybe a next version come out, you're going to sunset, like communicate to the users, hey, in 3 months you have to move to the new version, some stuff like that. The same thing with a data product, right? So, you know, you could just go in your organization and look at all the dashboards and look at the ones that are being
Once
used
again,
and sunset the ones that aren't. But, you know, having data product thinking in your organization naturally leads to those processes following. And that's important.
Thank you. I think it's that maturity step, isn't it, of data products? I think for me, there was the ambiguity around something called data domains, these big buckets of data. We moved to product, which is more precise. So I see that in that CDO Gartner model, Stan, for how the journey has progressed towards, we need to be precise what the data is, how it's used, what its value is. I think that maybe finally on this section leads us to data monetization, which I think you raised, Stan. So obviously data monetization, commercialization, something that's been bubbling around for a while. I think we touched on aspects of it through all of this and the value, but Are you seeing, and I think it depends on the organization. I think people sometimes think data monetization is selling a data set externally and realizing $1 for it and so on. What's your view on this, Dan? Do you think it's as simple as that? Because is it just about selling market data, which they do already, or is there more to it? Should every organization be looking at data monetization, perhaps?
Well, yeah, to that last question, definitely big yes, right? And that's why I'm
Okay.
recommending the MIT book that I've been raving about. But essentially, when you think about it for a second, making money from data by selling your data means that, let's imagine for a second that you're the chief data officer and you come up with this idea, I'm going to sell data. Well, it means that you have to carry responsibility for profit and loss somehow, right? Because
Yeah.
you'll have costs and you'll have revenues coming in. So you now become responsible for profit and loss. Are you even aware of the responsibility that that entails, right? So selling data is probably one of the harder and more complicated things to do, and also one of the things that happens least when it comes to data monetization. If you look at it through the MIT frameworks lens, they have like ICW, so you're improving something. What was it again? I forgot one of them. But the improving, wrapping, so it's W, and then selling. IWS it is.
Okay.
Right, so the selling part, let's put that aside for just a second. It happens and it's valuable, but it could just as easily start with the I part, improving something. So
Yeah.
if you put up a dashboard, you're building that dashboard with the purpose of, for example, managing an existing business process and making that business process run from, I don't know, 10% efficiency to 20% efficiency.
Yeah.
Right? So that itself is an improvement, and that itself can be translated into monetary terms.
Into value. Yeah. Okay.
Now, it
Yeah.
does also require you to, take the extra step. The ownership of profit and loss is here. The ownership of an individual data product that improves an existing process is a lot lower, but it still comes with responsibility, because that efficiency in the process only comes from, either you're bringing in more money because the process is now handling more customers, or you're saving more cost because you're running the process more efficiently. And the cost part might mean it is affecting people, right? So monetize, as soon as you go into monetization discussions, no matter if I, W, or S, there's always responsibility that comes with it to actually get to the dollar.
Yeah. Right. That book's going on my Christmas list. Susan, monetization of data, is it something you've seen in your work? Are people talking about that?
I just struggle to get people to see the value in having clean data, because that's where the monetization comes from, is clean, accurate data. But getting people to invest in that actual step of cleaning it up is really difficult. I don't think the people who know, but I don't think we're there with the wider organization yet. It's
a maturity step.
Yeah,
perhaps.
and
if you focus on cleaning and DQ, you're probably not to that point where you can really think about monetization, perhaps.
Yeah, and it's even like, marketing data that you can sell within the market. That's really valuable to see what your competitors are doing or be able to share that. But you got to have your own house in order before you can start monetizing it, and I don't think we're there yet.
Kyle, any final comment on monetization? Have your podcast touched on this often or not too
often? Yeah, a lot. Yeah, I think so. I think, when we use the term monetization, most business leaders, especially, still think of selling data. I think the data analytics community probably now understands that we just mean making money from data somehow. I remember we were engaged actually on a search for a FTSE 100 business to hire a CDO at the start of 2022, I think it was. And this organization, they seemed hell bent on monetizing data, and what they meant was selling data, and they have some quite unique data assets, so there probably was a lot of ability and an opportunity to kind of sell data. However, that part of that kind of scope of that role was that they wanted someone that had been in those types of environments before, where they had monetized data through selling. And as part of that interview process, with one person in particular was able to basically demonstrate to the business that actually, yes, you've got a lot of great data assets here that we can probably sell. However, there's so much more opportunity to make money from data by using it as
Just
opposed,
internally. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, to reduce cost or improve efficiencies or improve customer experience or, you know, drive revenue, new product growth, whatever the case may be, as opposed to what you will actually get from selling your data. And this individual had been in that, been in many organizations where they've been responsible for doing that. And, you know, on the whole said, you know, you might get several hundred thousands from selling data, but actually there's a few use cases here that can, you know, result in millions of upside. So maybe you need to change your thinking away from packaging it and selling it to using it more effectively, which I thought was a really interesting exercise for them to actually demonstrate to the business, and that seemed to work. So yeah, I think monetization as a term is used you know, as a blanket. I think
it's a bit broad.
Yeah, in the industry, I think we know we're taught there's two sides to the coin. I think monetization in boardrooms is still how do we sell our data? For the most part.
Maybe we should be looking at the value of the data, because it's, for example, you know, if you don't have accurate personal information and then you get a GDPR fine, that's a huge cost to the business, and then suddenly there's a value attached to that. Or
absolutely,
if you don't know what's going on in your data and there's fraud happening, then, you know, there's more than just monetization, it's a value thing.
Yeah, agreed. And if you're still data wrangling, so still trying to piece together and spending that, I think that still 80-20 rule is still there. Gartner even mentioned that recently.
Why is that still happening?
I know, but I don't think it's ever going to go away. I don't. Who knows? We will see. I hope Gartner check that in a couple of years' time. But we've let this middle section run longer, so let's move into the last section. But I think what we've been discussing really covers the points that you've called out. So, Kyle, I think your key prediction for next year, and we've really said this, that the data analytics teams being cut, they need to be expressing that value. I think there's been a real thread that we've talked through today. Stan, you called out AI governance, AI safety. If the teams are being cut and they've got to use the data better, they've got to articulate their value better, they're going to start to use AI. Clearly, it needs to be done under control, under governance, and safely. And Susan, you said about the competitive advantage that we just touched on there of having clean data and being the enabler, perhaps, of AI. So, Susan, let's go there first. So, the competitive advantage, maybe we've just really described that, but final thoughts on that and predictions for next year around clean data?
It could be fraud. You don't have a whole load of money or product walking out the door because you don't know where it's gone. It could be understanding your competitors, what they're doing and versus what you're doing, understanding your own customers better and what they want and being able to provide. It could be in procurement or supply chain and being more efficient, you know, which means you've got more budget to be able to do more marketing than your competitors. It's like all encompassing.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Stan, AI governance. There was obviously the AI summit recently, I think in the UK. AI governance was your call out for next year. I guess it's a progression of people using AI and being able to control that with confidence as well. So what do you see happening next year on that?
Well, I'll take a look at it from two angles for 2024 and beyond, because one angle is very clearly ahead of us, and that's a regulatory angle. Where usually the EU is first, right? And they actually did vote on it earlier this week or last week, if I remember correctly. So you'll see literally the AI Act in Europe being enacted over the next couple of years. So forcing organizations to do better with AI and data. But the US was a little bit ahead in my view, because about a month ago, Biden already released his executive order, right? So that's the regulatory angle, which is very clear and comes with, fines as big as the GDPR days, right? So it's serious.
Okay.
But on the other hand, you also have the technological driver and the value drivers that will force this AI governance issue at hand. Because I mean, let's take the example of a self-driving car, because it's easy to understand. But remember that similar power is now in every 12-year-old kid who can speak English or any language for that matter, right? So everybody could put AI in production, but let's look at it through the lens or the metaphor of a self-driving car. If the self-driving car hits somebody, are you going to blame the robot, right? No, it's the operator or the manufacturer. So those controls to make sure that the car doesn't hit anybody, and when it does, that there's a process for dealing with that, they need to be put into place. And because the genie got out of the bottle in November of last year, right? So AI will now be everywhere in everything. You will need to put controls around that. Otherwise, I mean, we all know the examples of racist or sexist chatbots. And please, people, stop making chatbots. I'm sick and tired of chatbots. But essentially,
Maybe we should have
there's a
vetoed things for
gazillion
next
other
year.
examples, right? So the comparison I sometimes make, Pete, is the following. With self-service BI, we got the proliferation of reports, right? So as a consequence, what you got in organizations is that CEOs would ask a question, how many customers do we have? And they would get answers ranging from 80,000 to 800,000. And people
8
would think that's
different
normal because,
dashboards.
yeah, it's in my dashboard, so it must be true. Now imagine the decision making. You know, as a human being looking at a dashboard, you only make, I don't know, a couple of dozen of decisions a day. So that's how many errors you can make if the data or the dashboard is wrong. But with an AI, it's thousands of decisions per second.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So that's how many decisions. It's like shooting yourself in the foot with a machine gun. So you'll need those controls just to safeguard the value and your brand reputation and whatnot with this AI in production. So it's not just regulatory. It's also for, putting a system in place where you need to have controls.
Yeah. Okay. Be very interesting to watch this. And as the regulation comes in, and there's going to be some interesting press around some of these trip ups, let's call them, where they do shoot themselves in the foot with a machine gun. So yeah, we'll see what plays out there. And Kyle, I think we've probably covered it, but your point on DA teams being cut and reduced and the value. So I guess we're really just hoping that more CDOs are achieving in 2024, because I know we're biased because we're data professionals, but it's good for the organizations, isn't it? So I guess we hope we've seen a tipping point on this and there's more value coming next year. Do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're just at a point now, aren't we, where, as you said, many organizations and business leaders are looking at this saying, we've invested X amount, we're not seeing the types of things that we thought we were going to. And hopefully that's enough of a wake-up call for them to reevaluate their strategy around, the types of people and activities they're doing to see value out of their data. I think that's, well, it's one of them. I don't see this changing unless we get an opportunity to influence before those hiring decisions are made normally, unless they are self-rectified by the fact that they've been through this cycle 2 or 3 times and they're still getting it wrong. That may cause, actually, let's reflect and get some advice. But yeah, it's a difficult one. I think the thing that you mentioned, Pete, and that Stan and Susan have mentioned about, AI, I think the ethics and the governance piece, I think what I see on that is it's really helping to drive the conversation for data more holistically, because every business leader is interested or maybe worried about what happens if we don't invest in that. Obviously, there's a lot of risk involved, but there's also a massive opportunity. So things like, data governance and data quality are finding their way into conversations that maybe historically might have been slightly more difficult to get into that boardroom because it's almost an enabler to doing Gen AI, which I'm seeing a lot of, data leaders kind of trying to use Gen AI as the thing to get the conversation going, and then to say, well, actually, we need to fix our data because garbage in, garbage out, all of that usual stuff. So yeah,
I can imagine those conversations that we need to do Gen AI, but we probably need this underneath. And they go, okay, well, let's do that. But then you need that underneath and you need data quality and you need some governance and so on. They're like, okay, so let's get the foundations in place and let's pilot and experiment with AI while we do that.
Yeah. I don't know how successful those conversations are being, but I know they're definitely being, Gen AI is being leveraged to get those conversations rolling for sure.
Yeah. Well, good. I was thinking about data literacy. I think data fluency, whatever we call it. Let's just trigger the buzzword bingo, isn't it?
Mark Powell is
We'll see if Mark
absolutely on
did
it.
indeed get in
I think
first.
he'd already started typing before you even said anything then.
That is
I
so
just
quick.
had it ready
Yeah.
to go.
Yeah.
That is remarkable. I may have set that up. Not with Mark, just saying I've got literacy written on the piece of paper, but I was thinking fluency as well. I think for me, it's the deepening of education. We focused on like building data teams and educating those data teams. And I think this came across in Barry Panayi's podcast, Carl, right? Sometimes we talk about the data teams and the business. We need to stop doing this. Data teams are part of the business. We need to have a single conversation. We need to have collaboration. We need to have agreed value with some data people working on it and some people in commercial lines and in customer areas and so on. So I think deepening of the data literacy, the education to the right level. People need to be educated to different levels, but I know there's different companies working on this and promoting this, but I think really long-term nurture literacy and fluency programs to help people. I think we'll see more of that next year, very role-based and persona-based, and I think it's a really good thing.
Yeah.
Okay, we are.
Definitely, and if I can chime in on that topic,
Yeah, of course.
Pete, I would say we do need it more. I mean, some people need to learn SQL and querying and all of that stuff. But ultimately, I would argue that everyone in an organization and in society needs to have some basic level of data literacy skill. And that basic level is critical thinking. What I said earlier, right? You ask the AI something, it comes up with an answer. You need critical thinking to evaluate whether you can take that
Make
answer
a
to the
judgment.
next level. And that's something we should all be teaching our children as well as our CEOs.
Yeah, very, very true. Okay, we've got 3 minutes left. I guess a quick recap in terms of what we've covered. Obviously, AI has flooded through the whole conversation. Data analytics, DNA teams. I'll just say DNA
Enough
teams.
sherry for you.
You've not been drinking my whiskey, Pete, have you?
Yeah, that's what's in this bottle. Yeah. Being obviously difficult economy this year, and we hope to see that improve next year. Value is key. Data products, data as a product, data as a service, and maturity there. Clean data, the foundations underpinning all of this, especially generative AI, data monetization. I am going to get that book and have a read. And then look into next year, AI governance clearly coming, data literacy hopefully improving. Again, still those foundations of clean data, measuring data quality, getting the governance and foundations in right to be able to improve our data, and hoping that more CDOs are really driving that thread of value and focusing on that and ultimately helping organizations on the back of it. I think that's key. So obviously we mentioned some of these at the start, but Stan, do you want to just call out that book again, the MIT book?
I think I've done it plenty of times and I just did on the chat. But
okay, cool. So people have got a link.
No nonsense, no bullshit framework that teaches you how to do this.
Brilliant. Thank you. And Susan, your book, I think someone's possibly already put that in the chat, but between the spreadsheets, sorry.
Yeah.
There it is on the screen.
Whoever won, if you want to get in touch with me via LinkedIn, then I can get that sent out to you.
Yeah.
Congratulations to whoever that is.
Yeah, we will make sure that gets joined up and you get your copy in time for Christmas. And Kyle, the podcast, I know you introduced it at the start, but can people get to that on your website?
Yeah, if you just go to orbitiongroup.com, go under, I think it's Content Hub, and the podcast is in there alongside all of the other stuff. Also, obviously, the book that Stan mentioned, I'm going to get hold of and have a read of. But I guess the other things around data monetization. So obviously, Doug Laney, I've had on the podcast as well. So definitely check his book out. And Bill Schmarzo does a lot of work in this space around the economics of data and analytics, and he's written a book on that specifically. So check that out if you're interested in that space for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. So just to wrap up then, thank you for joining us. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, drop me a message or follow up with me if there's anything that you'd like to discuss. Obviously, Stan, Susan and Kyle are on LinkedIn, connect with them as well. You can hop on to the LinkedIn company page for Ortecha. We've got some great stuff on there and resources on the website, so feel free to have a look and poke around. And finally, we will just wish you happy holidays. So we hope you have an amazing break. Hopefully you're getting one. And I think we just have to say at the end, remember, data is for life. It isn't just for Christmas.
Yeah.
Thanks very much, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye.